Thrown out, left with nothing, and saved by a whisper, the unbelievable night my own family destroyed me, and how a stranger rebuilt my life piece by piece. It began at what was supposed to be a simple family gathering, though from the moment I approached the driveway, something felt wrong. There was laughter spilling out of the windows, music humming in the background, and silhouettes of people moving inside, but for me that house felt like a wall, not a welcome. I stood outside for a moment, breathing in the cool evening air, trying to convince myself that maybe, just maybe, this night would be different. That maybe someone inside would look at me like I mattered. But the second I pushed open the door, the air changed. Conversations dipped. Faces turned my way, then quickly turned away. A few people exchanged glances that were too fast, too rehearsed, too knowing. The kind of glances people share when they all understand something you're not supposed to hear. I forced a smile. I greeted my relatives one by one, receiving barely their nods, hollow smiles, or in some cases, complete silence. It felt like I had walked into a movie where everyone else had the script, and I was improvising lines they didn't want to hear. As the evening dragged on, the atmosphere tightened around me. Someone made a joke with my name in it. Everyone laughed except me. Another person brought up my past mistakes, twisting them into entertainment for the table. Every word stung, but I kept swallowing it all because I didn't want to ruin the night. I didn't want to prove them right. I didn't want to be the problem they already believed I was. But eventually the jokes escalated. The accidental insults became intentional. The alcohol loosened tongues that were already sharp. One comment led to another, and suddenly the room erupted into chaos. Accusations flew at me from every direction, things I didn't do, things I apologized for years ago, things that weren't mine to carry. And in the middle of all that noise, a voice cut through clear as glass. "Get out!" I froze. Then someone else repeated it, louder this time. "Get out! Leave! We're done with you!" The words were like a door slamming shut inside my chest. I tried to respond, to defend myself, but no one listened. A couple of people physically guided me toward the exit, like I was trash being taken out. The final shove wasn't violent, but it was forceful enough to tell me exactly what they thought of me. The door closed behind me, muffling the laughter and the music, and suddenly the world was quiet. Too quiet. I stood on the doorstep with nothing but my jacket and a small bag I had brought. I didn't have a home to go back to anymore. I didn't have a car. I didn't have anyone to call. I didn't even have the strength to cry, at least not yet. I walked. I don't know how long. The night felt endless, stretching across cold streets and dim sidewalks. Every step echoed with the same painful truth. I was unwanted. Unwelcome. Alone. Eventually I reached a rundown bench near an empty bus stop. The streetlights above flickered like they were trying to stay awake. I sat down and hugged my knees to my chest, the cold seeping through every layer of clothing. Hunger gnawed at me. Fear coiled in my stomach. My thoughts spiraled so fast I couldn't catch any of them. Hours passed. The sky grew darker, then lighter, then darker again. I watched cars pass, watched strangers rush by, watched the world keep turning while my life had completely fallen apart. And for a moment, a long, dangerous moment, I wondered if disappearing would be easier than surviving. Then I heard footsteps. Slow, soft, deliberate. Not rushed, not hesitant, just steady. A stranger approached and sat beside me. They didn't stare. They didn't pity me. They didn't even speak at first. They simply existed next to me, like they understood that sometimes sitting in silence is the only language a broken person can understand. After minutes of nothing but the sound of the wind, the stranger leaned in slightly and whispered, "This isn't a loss. It's a doorway. Walk through it." The words hit me harder than any insult from earlier that night. There was a strange warmth in their voice, a quiet certainty that felt more real than anything I had heard in months. Before I could respond, they placed a small folded piece of paper in my hand and stood up. They walked away without looking back, disappearing into the night like they were never meant to be seen twice. For a long time, I just held the paper, staring at it, afraid to open it because in some twisted way, it felt like the last thread of hope I had left. When I finally unfolded it, there was an address and a short message. Come tomorrow. There is help. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed on that bench until morning, replaying the whisper in my mind again and again. I didn't know why I trusted it, why I believed a stranger when I couldn't even believe myself anymore, but I did. When the sun rose and warmed my frozen fingers, I stood up and made my way to the address. It led me to a small community center I had passed dozens of times without ever noticing. Inside were people who didn't ask questions I wasn't ready to answer. They offered food, a bed, warm clothes, and conversations that didn't feel like interrogations. They saw a person where others saw a problem. Days turned into weeks. Weeks into months. I worked at jobs at first, cleaning, stocking shelves, helping with deliveries. Slowly, I earned trust, money, stability. I learned new skills. I started saving. I rebuilt myself from the ground up, brick by fragile brick. Eventually, I got a steady job. Then a room. Then, after what felt like a lifetime, a home I could finally call my own. The night I unlocked that door, I broke down completely. Not from sadness, but from overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude for the stranger, for their whisper, for the chance they'd given me when no one else would. Years later, I found myself back at that same bus stop. Not because I needed help, but because I wanted to offer the same whisper that once saved me. I knew what kind of pain sat on that bench. I knew how cold the world could feel when you think no one cares. One evening, I saw someone sitting exactly where I had once sat, shaking, lost, eyes empty in the way only someone who has hit rock bottom truly understands. I sat beside them, and after a moment, leaned close and whispered, "This isn't the end. It's the beginning you didn't know you needed." And in that moment, everything came full circle. I had become the whisper that once saved me. I had become the doorway someone else could walk through. Because sometimes life collapses so it can be rebuilt stronger. Sometimes you lose everything so you can finally gain yourself. And sometimes all it takes to save a life is a quiet whisper in the darkest night. The night I whispered those words to the stranger on the bench, I felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't pride. It wasn't confidence. It was purpose. A spark that flickered quietly but steadily, reminding me of who I once was and who I was becoming. But life has an interesting way of testing you the moment you think you've found solid ground. The weeks following that night were calm, almost too calm. I was settling into my routine, building stability, creating the kind of life I once envied in others. I woke up early, went to work, volunteered at the community center on weekends, and slowly became a familiar face to people who once would have walked past me without a second glance. Then one morning, everything changed again. I received a letter. Not a bill. Not a flyer. A letter with handwriting I recognized instantly, the sharp, slanted handwriting of someone from my past. Someone from the home I had been thrown out of. For a long moment I stood frozen, the envelope trembling in my fingers. My first instinct was to throw it away, to erase any trace of the people who erased me. But something inside whispered that I needed to read it, not for them, but for myself. When I finally tore it open, the words inside weren't what I expected. They weren't apologies. They weren't invitations. They weren't explanations. Instead, it read, "You left things behind. You need to come get them." No warmth. No signature. No. Please. Just a blunt message telling me to return to the place that broke me. For hours I paced my living room, running my fingers through my hair, battling the chaos of emotions swirling inside me. Fear. Anger. Curiosity. Dread. And something else, something like the ghost of hope that maybe, just maybe, someone wanted to see me again. Eventually, I decided to go. Not because I wanted to reconnect. Not because I needed their approval. but because I realized I wasn't the same broken person who walked out of that house. I wasn't returning for them, I was returning for closure. The walk to that neighborhood felt surreal. It looked the same houses, the same driveways, the same old street signs, but I felt like a stranger visiting the ruins of a past life. When I reached the familiar house, I hesitated. My hand hovered above the doorbell. Before I could press it, the door opened. And there they were. My family. The same faces that had turned away from me. The same voices that had shouted at me to leave. But they weren't laughing now. Their expressions were stiff, unreadable, a mix of discomfort, and something else I couldn't name. No one invited me in. No one hugged me. No one smiled. One of them simply said, with no emotion at all, "Your stuff is in the garage." I swallowed hard and nodded, walking past them into the garage. There wasn't much, some old clothes, a few books, a box of childhood photos. As I sorted through the dusty boxes, something strange happened. I expected memories to hit me hard, to tear me open, to make me crumble. But instead I felt nothing. No pain. No fear. No longing. Just distance. Like I was sorting through someone else's life entirely. It was then I understood something profound. I hadn't lost my family that night. I had outgrown them long before they kicked me out. When I finished loading the boxes into a bag, I turned around. The garage door creaked as my family hovered near the entrance, unsure of what to say. For a moment we stood in silence, all of us trapped in the tension of unspoken words. Then someone finally asked, barely above a whisper, "Are you doing okay?" I paused. Not to think of the answer, but to savor that I now had the power to choose how much of myself I wanted to give. I nodded once. "I'm doing more than okay." I didn't owe them details. I didn't owe them explanations. Their expressions shifted slightly, a mixture of surprise and discomfort, but I didn't stay to read them. I walked out of that garage, out of that house, out of that chapter for good. As I stepped back onto the street, something warm bloomed in my chest. Freedom. I had returned to the place that broke me, and instead of shattering again, I stood taller than I ever had. But the story wasn't done yet. That evening, I arrived at the community center. One of the volunteers hurried up to me with urgency in their eyes. "There's someone asking for you." My heart skipped. For a moment I thought, hoped, it might be the stranger who once whispered the words that saved my life. But when I entered the room, I saw someone else entirely. It was the person I had whispered to weeks before, the one I tried to help the same way I was once helped. Their face lit up when they saw me, but not with desperation this time. With gratitude. They told me that after hearing my whisper, they'd gone to the address I had written for them. They'd found support. They'd found safety. They'd found the first fragile thread of hope. And then they said something I never expected to hear. "I want to do what you did. I want to help someone else." In that moment, I felt the world shift again, not violently this time, but like something settling into place. Like puzzle pieces locking together. Like the universe exhaling. I realized something extraordinary. The whisper that saved me wasn't just a message. It was a torch. Passed from one person to the next, lighting the darkest corners of our lives. And now, someone else was ready to carry it. Over the next months, we worked together at the center. We created late-night support groups for anyone sleeping rough. We organized donation drives, warm clothing nights, emergency meal stations. Slowly, more and more people joined us. People who had been broken. People who had been healed. People who wanted to pass on the light they once received. Our community grew, not because of resources or money, but because of connection, compassion, and the invisible thread linking strangers to one another through moments of shared pain and shared hope. The more we helped, the more the city started noticing. The center received grants, partnerships, volunteers, attention from organizations that had ignored us for years. And somehow, without meaning to, without planning to, I became someone people looked to. Someone they trusted. Someone they leaned on. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about me. It was about the whisper that started it all. The whisper that opened a doorway when it felt like every door had slammed shut. One evening, months later, when the center was quiet and the sun was setting in shades of gold and violet, I sat outside, thinking about everything that had happened. The family gathering. The bench. The stranger. The paper. The address. The first step into a new life. And for the first time, I let myself wonder about them, the stranger who saved me. Where were they now? Did they know what their small act had created? Did they know how many lives they had indirectly touched? I didn't know. Maybe I never would. But I believed something deeply, fiercely, unshakably. That somewhere out there, another lost soul was sitting on another cold bench in another silent night, waiting for a whisper of their own. And if fate allowed it, I would be that whisper. Because life had taught me something powerful. You don't need to shout to save someone. You just need to show up. You just need to care. You just need to whisper the right words at the right time. And sometimes, that's enough to change everything. The months that followed were some of the most transformative of my life. The community center, once a quiet shelter few people knew about, had become a living network of hope, a place where lost souls found direction, where strangers became family, and where every whisper of kindness turned into another spark of change. But with growth came challenges, new ones, deeper ones, ones I wasn't prepared for. One evening, long after most of the volunteers had gone home and the last of the donated meals had been served, I was locking up when a man lingered outside. He stood under the streetlight, unmoving, like he had been waiting there for hours. I recognized the look in his eyes. I had seen it before, once in the mirror. He approached slowly, hands shoved deep in his pockets, shoulders hunched as if the weight of the world rested on them. His face was tired, unshaven, drawn from too many sleepless nights. When he spoke, his voice cracked. Are you the one who helps people here? I nodded. I try. He looked at me strangely then, like he was searching for something in my expression, something unspoken. After a long silence, he said, Someone told me to find you. My heart skipped. Another whisper? Another chain reaction? Who told you? I asked. But he shook his head. I don't know. I never saw their face clearly. They just said you'd understand. A chill ran through me. The stranger. The whisper. The beginning of everything. Could it be them? Had they returned, not to be found, but to guide someone else to me? I invited the man inside. We sat in the quiet office as he told me fragments of his story. His home lost, his job gone, his trust shattered. Every sentence trembled. Every memory seemed to bruise him. And yet, in the middle of all that pain, one detail stood out like a pulse. They told me, he said softly, that you know what it's like to lose everything. Those words hit me deeper than he could have known. I listened. I offered him food, a warm place to sleep, fresh clothes. I assured him that he wasn't alone. I saw something shift in him, a flicker of relief, the first spark of safety he had felt in months. But later that night, as I walked home under the dim glow of streetlights, my thoughts returned to the stranger, the whisper that had once saved me. If it was truly them who sent this man, then why? Why now? Why through others instead of returning themselves? Was I supposed to find them? Were they testing me? Or had they always been invisible, appearing only in the moments they were needed most? I didn't know. But I felt something new building inside my chest, a sense that my story wasn't just about healing anymore. It was about discovery. About unraveling the thread that connected every person touched by that whisper. The next morning, the man I had helped approached me with something I didn't expect, a folded piece of paper. Not unlike the one the stranger had once slipped into my hand. This was left for you, he said. In my bag. I swear it wasn't there before. My breath caught. I unfolded the paper slowly, afraid of what I might find. There were only 5 words written inside. Your journey isn't over yet. No signature. No clue. Just the same strange, quiet certainty that had followed me since that night on the bench. I folded the paper with trembling fingers. The message wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It was an invitation. Over the next few weeks, more signs began to appear, subtle, almost invisible unless you knew how to look. A stranger lingering across the street who vanished when I blinked. A donation envelope with no name, no address, containing exactly the amount we lacked that week. A note taped to our door late at night reading, "Keep going." 3 times I thought I saw a figure in the distance watching me quietly, almost protectively. And each time, they disappeared before I could get closer. It felt impossible, unreal, yet familiar. Just like the whisper that started it all. But life, unpredictable as ever, had more in store. One rainy evening, the center received a call from a frantic woman begging for help. Her teenage son had run away, leaving behind only a message that he needed to disappear. Something about her voice hit me hard, the fear, the helplessness, the urgency. We organized a search group, volunteers and locals joining forces to comb the streets. Hours passed. Rain drenched us until we could barely see. The city felt endless and unforgiving. Then I spotted him. Sitting alone under the awning of an abandoned shop, trembling, hugging his knees just like I once had. I approached slowly, carefully, the way someone had once done for me. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were red, swollen, terrified. "I don't know where to go," he whispered. I sat beside him and let the rain fall around us. I didn't preach. I didn't lecture. I didn't demand explanations. Instead, I leaned closer, lowered my voice, and whispered the same words that had saved my life, the same words I once passed on. "This isn't a loss. It's a doorway. Walk through it." His eyes widened. Recognition flashed across his face. Someone had whispered to him before. Someone familiar. Someone who left whisper-shaped footprints across the city like invisible trails of hope. "Who told you that?" I asked gently. He stared at me through the rain, shivering. "A person in a dark coat," he said. I couldn't see their face, but their voice. He paused, swallowing hard. It sounded like they knew me. Like they knew you too. My heart pounded. The stranger wasn't just guiding people toward me. They were weaving our stories together. Preparing something. Leading me somewhere. The next day, after returning the boy safely to his mother, I returned to the bench, my bench, the place where my second life began. I sat there in silence, waiting. Hoping. Hours passed. People came and went. The city breathed around me. And then, just as the sun dipped below the horizon, I heard it. A whisper. Soft. Close. Familiar. But when I turned, no one was there. Only a folded note resting beside me, placed without a sound. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single line. "It's almost time." And just like that, the world felt bigger again, full of questions, full of fate, full of threads I had yet to follow. The whisper that once saved me was calling me forward once more. And this time, I wasn't afraid. The next days after that revelation felt strangely electrifying, as if every conversation, every face, every passing moment carried some hidden meaning I had overlooked before. I started waking up earlier, feeling a pull I couldn't quite define, like invisible threads tugging me towards something just beyond my understanding. And the more time I spent at the center, the clearer it became. This wasn't just a refuge. It was a crossroads, a place where broken lives intersected and reshaped one another. Week by week, new people arrived, some lost, some angry, some pretending they were fine when their eyes told a different story. One evening, a teenager showed up, trembling so hard his backpack nearly slipped off his shoulder. He wouldn't speak, not even his name. So I stayed with him until he finally whispered, "They left me." 2 words that cracked open everything inside me. I knew that pain too well. I told him gently, "Being left behind doesn't mean you stop moving forward." It wasn't poetic. It just came out. But he looked at me like those words mattered. And maybe they did. One night after everyone went to sleep, Mara approached me with a cautious, almost hesitant look. "There's something different about you lately," she said. "Like you're listening to something the rest of us can't hear." I laughed at first, but she wasn't joking. "You have this way of speaking to people exactly the moment they need it. It's like you were meant to be here." Her words unsettled me. Not because they were wrong, but because they were too close to the truth I was trying to understand myself. I still thought often about the stranger who whispered to me that night. Sometimes I wondered if I really remembered it correctly, or if my desperate mind had amplified it into something bigger. But the message stayed inside me like a compass, always pointing me toward the next step. As winter crept in, the center grew colder, and the nights stretched longer. I took on more shifts, sometimes staying awake just to make sure no one slipped through the cracks. One early morning, while I swept the hallway, I noticed an envelope slipped under the main door, blank, except for my name written in a sharp, familiar handwriting. My heart pounded as I picked it up. Inside was a single line. "You're not done yet." There was no signature. No clue. Just the same sensation I remembered from the whisper on the bus stop bench. A chill ran through me, but not from fear, from recognition. Everything inside me tightened with the feeling that something was coming, something that would test not only me but the fragile network of lives connected to this place. I didn't know whether it would be a challenge, a revelation, or a collision of the past with the present. I only knew one thing. The story wasn't simply continuing. It was shifting, deepening. And somewhere out there, the person who started all of this was still watching my path unfold.